I'm sitting here in my living room right now, 3 weeks after it happened, and I still can't sleep. My dog is curled up on the couch next to me, but he won't go anywhere near the back door anymore, won't even look at it. Every time I try to take him outside after dark, he plants his feet and refuses to move. A German Shepherd who used to patrol our backyard like he owned it now acts like there's something waiting for him out there in the shadows. It started as the most ordinary camping trip I'd ever taken. I've been going to the same spot for years now. Same forest, same trails, same little clearing by the stream where I always set up my tent. It's about 3 hours north of here, deep enough in the woods that you don't see many other people, but not so remote that you feel completely cut off from civilization. I'd been camping there since I was younger, knew every trail, every good fishing spot, every place where the wildlife liked to pass through. It felt like my second home, the kind of place where you can relax and not worry about anything. My dog has been coming with me since he was a puppy. He's 5 now, full grown, about 90 pounds of pure muscle and energy. Best camping companion you could ask for. He'd run ahead on the trails, circle back to check on me, chase squirrels up trees, splash in the streams, never gave me a moment of trouble. At night, he'd sleep in the tent with me, and I always felt safe having him there. About a year ago, I saw this cheap action camera on sale online. One of those knockoff models that tries to look like the expensive brands but costs maybe $30. I figured what the hell, might be fun to see what the world looks like from a dog's perspective. So I bought this little harness thing that straps around his chest with a mount on top for the camera. The first time I put it on him, he looked at me like I was crazy, but after a few minutes, he forgot it was even there. I started bringing the camera on every camping trip after that. I'd strap it on him in the morning, let him run around while I made breakfast or packed up camp, then watch the footage at night while sitting by the fire. Honestly, most of it was pretty boring. Lots of shaky footage of his paws running, close-ups of tree bark when he'd stop to sniff something, the occasional squirrel darting across the frame. Sometimes I'd catch him drinking from the stream, or I'd see my own boots walking in front of him on the trail. Nothing exciting, but I enjoyed it anyway. Made me feel like I was seeing the forest through his eyes. This particular trip was in mid-October. The weather forecast looked perfect for the weekend. Clear skies, temperatures in the mid-50s during the day, dropping to the 40s at night. Not too cold, not too hot. The leaves were just starting to turn, which meant the forest would look incredible. I'd been looking forward to this trip for weeks. Work had been stressful, and I needed a few days to just disconnect and breathe. We got to the campsite on Friday afternoon. I parked at the little dirt lot where I always leave my car and hiked the 2 miles into my usual spot. The stream was running clear and cold, and I could hear it from 50 yards away. I set up the tent in the same place I always did, under a big pine tree that provided some natural shelter. Got the fire pit ready, hung my food bag from a high branch to keep it away from any bears, and laid out my sleeping bag inside the tent. My dog had the camera on his back like usual. I'd turned it on when we started the hike in, and by the time we finished setting up camp, I figured the battery was probably about half dead. I took it off him and plugged it into my portable battery pack to charge while I made dinner. That night I cooked some hot dogs over the fire and shared a few bites with him. He curled up next to me while I ate, staring into the flames like he was hypnotized. It was peaceful, exactly what I needed. After dinner, I pulled out the camera and scrolled through the footage on the little screen. Same as always, him running ahead on the trail, sniffing at trees, stopping to watch a chipmunk. I watched for maybe 10 minutes before I got bored and turned it off. Didn't see anything worth keeping. I tossed the camera into my backpack and forgot about it. That night, I slept great. The sound of the stream, the cool air, the smell of pine trees. My dog snored beside me in the tent, and I felt completely relaxed for the first time in months. When I woke up Saturday morning, the sun was just starting to come through the trees, and I could see my breath in the cold air. I unzipped the tent and stepped outside, and everything felt right with the world. But something had been bothering me for a while now. I've been camping at this same spot for years, and I'd only ever explored maybe a quarter of the surrounding area. There were trails that led deeper into the forest, further away from the main camping areas that I'd never bothered to check out. Every time I came here, I'd tell myself I should go see what was out there, but I'd always end up staying close to camp, fishing in the stream, or just relaxing by the fire. This time, I decided to actually do it. I told my dog we were going on a longer hike than usual. He seemed excited, wagging his tail and bouncing around while I filled up my water bottles and packed a small day bag. I brought some snacks, my knife, a flashlight, and the camera. Strapped it onto his back and turned it on. The battery was fully charged. I figured we'd be gone for a few hours, maybe see some new parts of the forest, then head back to camp before it got too late. We started walking around 9 in the morning. The trail leading away from camp was well marked at first, but after about an hour, it started to fade. I could still see evidence of people having been through here before, but it was clear this wasn't a popular route. The trees got thicker, the underbrush more dense. My dog stayed close to me, which was unusual. Normally, he'd run ahead and disappear for minutes at a time, but today he seemed more cautious. After about 2 hours of hiking, I noticed the forest had gotten really quiet. No birds singing, no squirrels chattering, just the sound of our footsteps on the leaves and the occasional branch cracking under my boots. I stopped walking and listened. Nothing. It was the kind of silence that feels wrong, like nature is holding its breath. My dog stopped too. His ears went back, and he stood completely still, staring into the thick trees to our left. I looked where he was looking, but didn't see anything. Just more trees and shadows. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling and kept walking. My dog followed, but he was moving slower now, stopping every few steps to look behind us or off to the side. I told him he was fine, that there was nothing to worry about, but I didn't sound convincing even to myself. Then I heard it. A low sound somewhere in the distance. Not quite a growl, not quite a moan. It was deep and resonant like nothing I'd ever heard before. It seemed to echo through the forest, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. My dog froze completely. His whole body went rigid, and I could see the hair standing up along his spine. I've never seen him react like that to anything. Not to other dogs, not to wild animals, not even to thunder. This was pure instinct, and it was telling him something was very wrong. I stood there for a minute, listening, but the sound didn't come again. I told myself it was probably just a deer, or maybe a bear somewhere far off. Nothing to worry about, but my dog wasn't buying it. He kept staring into the trees, and then he did something he'd never done before in his entire life. He whimpered, not a bark, not a growl, just a high-pitched whimper of pure fear. It sent chills down my spine. I walked back to him and tried to calm him down, running my hand over his head and telling him everything was okay. But he wouldn't move. He just stood there, trembling slightly, staring at something I couldn't see. Then he bolted. He took off running back the way we'd come, moving faster than I'd ever seen him run before. I shouted after him, but he didn't even slow down. I started jogging after him, then running, trying to keep up. My backpack bounced against my shoulders, and branches whipped at my face as I crashed through the underbrush. It took me maybe 10 minutes to catch up to him. I found him back at camp, hiding under the picnic table I'd set up near the fire pit. His tail was tucked between his legs, and he was shaking. I knelt down next to him and checked him over for injuries, thinking maybe he'd stepped on something sharp or gotten bit by a snake. But there was nothing. He wasn't hurt. He was just terrified. I spent the next half hour trying to calm him down. I gave him some water and some food, but he wouldn't eat. He'd just lay there under the picnic table, occasionally looking toward the tree line like he expected something to come out of the forest at any moment. I decided we'd just have an early dinner and take it easy for the rest of the day. Maybe the long hike had been too much for him, or maybe he'd seen a bear and it had spooked him. Whatever it was, he clearly didn't want to go back into the woods. I made a fire and cooked some food while the sun started to get lower in the sky. My dog stayed close to me, which wasn't like him at all. Normally, he'd wander around the campsite, exploring and sniffing at things, but today he wouldn't leave my side. Every few minutes, he'd look toward the trees and his ears would perk up, like he was listening for something. After dinner, while there was still some daylight left, I decided to check the footage from the camera. I hadn't thought much about it during the hike, but now I was curious. Maybe the camera had caught something that would explain why my dog had freaked out so badly. I pulled the camera out of my bag and turned it on. The battery was still at about 70%, which meant it had been recording the whole time. I started scrolling through the footage, fast-forwarding through most of it. The usual stuff, his paws hitting the ground, trees passing by, me walking ahead of him on the trail. Then I got to the part where we were deep in the forest, right before he started acting strange. My stomach dropped. In the distance, barely visible between the trees, there was something standing there, something massive and dark. It was upright, at least 8 or 9 feet tall, with impossibly broad shoulders. The whole thing was covered in what looked like dark fur, matted and thick. It wasn't moving, just standing there, watching us. The footage showed it for maybe 5 seconds before my dog turned away, but those 5 seconds were burned into my brain. The shape was wrong. Too tall to be a person, too broad to be a bear standing on its hind legs, and the way it stood there, so still, so deliberate, it was watching us. I checked the timestamp on the footage. This was right when my dog first started acting strange, right before he froze and wouldn't move. The creature had been there the whole time, watching us, and my dog had sensed it. He'd known something was wrong long before I had any clue. I sat there staring at the tiny screen, rewatching those few seconds over and over. I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the light, or maybe a tree formation that looked strange on camera. But I knew what I was seeing. This was real. This thing had been there. Then I noticed something else. Right before my dog took off running, there was a split second in the footage where the creature moved. Just a single step forward, but it was enough. It had taken a step toward us. I felt sick. The sun was setting now, and the forest around my campsite was getting dark. I looked toward the tree line, and suddenly everything felt different. The peaceful camping spot I'd been coming to for years now felt exposed and vulnerable. Those trees that had always seemed welcoming now looked like they were hiding something. I tried to stay calm. I told myself that whatever it was had been far away, that it probably wasn't even interested in us, that we were safe at camp. But the rational part of my brain was losing the argument with the part that had just watched footage of something massive and unknown standing in the forest, watching us. My dog was pressed against my leg, and he wouldn't stop staring at the tree line. His whole body was tense, ready to run at the first sign of danger. I started getting the tent ready for bed, even though it was still early. I figured if we were going to be sitting here scared, we might as well be in the tent where we'd have at least some barrier between us and whatever was out there. I was just zipping up the tent door when I heard something. A heavy footstep, maybe 50 yards away in the direction we'd come from earlier. Then another one. Then silence. I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it toward the sound, but the beam only reached about 30 feet before it disappeared into the darkness. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it. Something was out there. My dog started whining, a low, continuous sound that he couldn't seem to control. I put my hand on his head, trying to calm him, but I was shaking too. Another footstep, closer this time. Then, from a completely different direction, the sound of a branch breaking, It was circling us. I spun around, pointing the flashlight in different directions, but there was nothing to see. Just trees and darkness, but the sounds kept coming. Footsteps in the leaves, always just beyond the edge of my vision. Moving around the campsite, staying in the darkness, never coming close enough for me to actually see it. This went on for maybe 10 minutes, though it felt like hours. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. My dog was pressed against me so tightly I could feel him shaking. Then everything went silent. Complete, total silence. Not even the usual forest sounds, no wind, no insects, nothing. Just an oppressive quiet that made my skin crawl. We stayed like that, frozen and listening for what felt like an eternity. I don't know how long we actually stood there. Time seemed to stop. My hand was still on the flashlight, gripping it so hard my knuckles had gone white. Every few seconds I'd sweep the beam across the tree line, desperate to see something, anything. But there was only darkness and trees. My dog had stopped whining. That was almost worse than the sound. He was completely silent now, pressed against my legs so tightly I could feel his heart pounding through his fur. I'd never felt him this scared before. Not during thunderstorms, not at the vet. Not even the time a car backfired right next to us on a walk. This was different. This was primal terror. I kept waiting for something to happen, for whatever was out there to either attack or leave. But nothing happened. The silence stretched on, and with each passing second, I felt my nerves fraying more and more. My breath was coming in short gasps. I tried to control it, tried to stay calm, but my body wasn't listening to my brain anymore. Then I heard it. A single breath, deep and wet, like something exhaling through mucus-filled lungs. It came from maybe 20 feet away, just outside the ring of light from my flashlight. I spun toward the sound, the beam cutting through the darkness. For just a fraction of a second, I saw something. 2 eyes reflecting the light back at me. They were too high off the ground to be a deer, too far apart to be human. And they had an intelligence behind them that made every hair on my body stand on end. Then they were gone. Disappeared back into the darkness so fast I almost convinced myself I'd imagined them. But I hadn't. My dog had seen them too. He let out a low growl, the first aggressive sound he'd made all night. It was a warning growl, the kind dogs make when they're trying to scare something away despite being terrified themselves. The breathing came again, but from a different spot now, further to the left, circling around us. Whatever it was testing us, seeing how we'd react, figuring out if we were a threat or just prey. I wanted to yell at it, to make myself seem bigger and scarier, but my voice was stuck in my throat. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, but I knew that was the worst thing I could do. Running triggers the chase response. I'd learned that years ago in a wilderness survival course. Never run from a predator. But this didn't feel like a normal predator. This felt calculated, intelligent. Then, from somewhere close by, a roar, not like any animal I'd ever heard. Deep and guttural and so loud that I felt it in my chest. It wasn't just sound, it was vibration, something primal that bypassed my brain and went straight to my survival instincts. My dog started whining louder, a high-pitched sound of absolute terror. The roar echoed through the forest, bouncing off the trees, making it impossible to tell exactly where it had come from. But it was close, too close. Then something hit a tree near the edge of camp. Not a gentle tap, but a violent impact that shook the tree hard enough to drop branches. I spun around with the flashlight, but whatever had hit it was already gone. Another tree even closer to camp, another massive impact. It was showing me what it could do, demonstrating its strength, warning me. My camping cooler, which I'd left sitting near the fire pit, suddenly flew through the air. I didn't see what threw it. One second it was on the ground, the next it was sailing across the campsite, contents spilling everywhere. It landed maybe 20 feet away, the lid popping open and my food scattering across the ground. I hadn't seen it, hadn't seen what threw the cooler. It was moving too fast, staying in the darkness, just beyond where my flashlight could reach. That's when the rational part of my brain finally won out over the part that wanted to stay in denial. We had to leave, right now. I grabbed my backpack and stuffed in whatever I could reach. Flashlight, knife, water bottle, the camera, left everything else. The tent, the sleeping bags, the camping gear, none of it mattered. We just needed to get out of there. My dog was already at the edge of camp, waiting. He knew we were leaving before I'd even made the decision. We started down the trail toward the parking area. It was about 2 miles away under normal circumstances, mostly downhill, and I'd hiked it dozens of times in daylight. But in the dark, with my flashlight only showing a few feet ahead of me, it felt like a completely different place. Every shadow looked like it was moving. Every sound made me jump. My dog stayed right next to me, occasionally looking back over his shoulder. I could hear him panting, could see his breath in the cold air when the flashlight beam passed over him. We'd made it maybe half a mile when I heard it behind us. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, not trying to be quiet anymore. Following us at a steady pace, matching our speed, staying maybe 30 or 40 yards back. It was hurting us, not trying to catch us yet, just pushing us along, keeping us moving in a specific direction. The realization hit me like ice water. This wasn't random. Whatever was following us knew exactly what it was doing. It was driving us somewhere, controlling where we went by staying just close enough to keep us running, but not so close that we'd panic and bolt in an unpredictable direction. I tried to change course, veering to the right off the main trail, but the moment I did, I heard movement in that direction too. Branches breaking, something large moving through the brush to cut us off. I turned back to the trail and the sound stopped. It was like being in a maze with walls I couldn't see. Every time I tried to go a different direction, there was something there to redirect us back to the path it wanted us on. My lungs were burning. I'm in decent shape, but running in hiking boots with a heavy backpack at night through uneven terrain was pushing me to my limit. My dog was handling it better, his 4 legs and lower center of gravity making him more stable. But I could hear him panting hard beside me. The footsteps behind us maintained their steady rhythm, not speeding up, not slowing down, just there, always there. A constant reminder that we were being followed, being hunted, being controlled. I realized with growing horror that I'd taken a wrong turn somewhere in the dark. This wasn't the trail back to the parking area. I didn't recognize any of the landmarks. The panic I'd been trying to keep under control started to bubble up. We were going the wrong way, heading deeper into the forest, and whatever was behind us was still following. The trail got rougher, harder to navigate. I had to slow down to avoid tripping over roots and rocks. My dog was having an easier time than me, able to see better in the dark, but he kept stopping to wait for me to catch up. Then the trail opened up into a small clearing, and I saw a cluster of large boulders off to the side. Without thinking, I grabbed my dog and pulled him behind them. I turned off the flashlight and we crouched there in complete darkness, trying to control our breathing, trying to be as silent as possible. Maybe we could hide, maybe it would pass by and lose our trail. I could hear it getting closer, those heavy footsteps coming up the trail we'd just been on, getting louder, closer. Then the footsteps stopped. I held my breath. My dog was completely still next to me, every muscle tensed. I could feel him trembling against my leg, could feel his rapid heartbeat through his fur. Silence, complete and total silence. I waited, 10 seconds, 20, 30. Nothing, no sound, no movement. It was like the forest itself was holding its breath. I started to wonder if it had moved on, if maybe we'd actually managed to hide successfully. My hand was cramping from gripping my knife so tightly, and I slowly started to relax my fingers. That's when I heard it. A sniffing sound, low and wet, like something with a massive nose drawing in air. It was close. Too close. The sniffing continued, moving around the boulder. It was smelling the ground, smelling the air, tracking us by scent. All that running, all that sweat and fear we'd been putting out, it had left a trail as clear as footprints in snow. My dog's body went even more rigid. His lips pulled back from his teeth in a silent snarl. He wanted to fight, to defend us, but he was smart enough to know that whatever was on the other side of that rock would tear him apart. The sniffing stopped. For a moment there was nothing. Then, right on the other side of the boulder we were hiding behind, I heard breathing. Deep, heavy breaths, the kind of breathing that moves a huge chest, that pulls massive amounts of air in and out. It was so close I could hear the slight whistle in each exhale, could hear what sounded almost like a rumble in its chest. It knew exactly where we were, knew we were crouched behind this rock, knew we were trapped, and it was taking its time. There was no rush. We weren't going anywhere. I pressed myself harder against the cold stone, making myself as small as possible. My dog did the same, tucking his body against mine. We were both shaking now, both trying not to make a sound. The breathing continued, steady, patient, waiting. Then I saw a hand reach over the top of the boulder. At least that's what I think it was, though calling it a hand doesn't really capture what I was seeing. It was massive, easily twice the size of mine, covered in coarse, dark hair that was almost black. The fingers were long, maybe 7 or 8 inches each, and they curled over the top of the rock with a grip that looked like it could crush stone. I didn't think. Couldn't think. I grabbed my dog and ran. We burst out from behind the boulders and sprinted back toward the trail. Behind us, I heard a grunt, then the sound of heavy footsteps breaking into a run. It was done being patient. It was chasing us now. I've never run so fast in my life. My lungs were burning, my legs felt like they were going to give out, but pure adrenaline kept me moving. My dog was running beside me, and I could hear him panting hard. The trail led to a creek, water moving fast over rocks. I didn't slow down, just splashed right through it, my boots filling with cold water. My dog swam across next to me, and we scrambled up the other side. I looked back once, shining my flashlight behind us. The beam caught something at the edge of the creek, a massive silhouette standing on the opposite bank. Just standing there, watching us, not following anymore. I didn't stop to figure out why. We kept running. We must have run for another 20 minutes before I finally slowed down. My chest hurt from breathing so hard, and my legs felt like jelly. My dog collapsed next to me, panting heavily, his tongue hanging out. The sounds behind us had stopped. No more footsteps, no more breathing. Whatever it was, it had stopped at the creek and let us go. But I didn't trust it. We kept moving, slower now, but still moving. I pulled out my phone, hoping for a signal, but there was nothing. We were too deep in the forest. After another hour of walking, I spotted an old hunting blind off to the side of the trail. It was just a small wooden platform built up in a tree, with some weathered planks forming walls. Not great shelter, but better than nothing. We climbed up and I collapsed onto the platform. My dog lay down next to me and I could see his paws were bleeding from all the running. I felt terrible. I'd brought him out here, put him in danger. This was all my fault. I pulled out my water bottle and gave him some. He drank gratefully, then lay his head down on my leg. We sat there in the darkness, listening. For a while, there was nothing. Just normal forest sounds slowly returning, insects chirping, wind rustling through the leaves. It felt almost peaceful. Then I heard it again. That sound from earlier, the one that wasn't quite a growl and wasn't quite a moan. Except now it was different. It sounded higher pitched, and it was coming from multiple directions. There was more than one of them. They were calling to each other, communicating, and we were somewhere in the middle. My dog started whining again, pulling at my jacket with his teeth, trying to get me to move. He was right. We couldn't stay here. We climbed down from the hunting blind and started moving again. The trail had completely disappeared now. We were just pushing through thick undergrowth, branches tearing at my clothes and scratching my face. My dog was leading the way, his instincts better than my sense of direction in the dark. I could hear them behind us now, multiple sets of footsteps crashing through the brush, not even trying to be quiet anymore. They were hunting us. The ground suddenly dropped away and I nearly fell into a ravine. I caught myself at the edge, my flashlight beam showing a steep drop of maybe 20 feet onto rocks below. There was no way around it. We'd have to climb down. I went first, moving as carefully as I could in the dark. The rocks were loose and kept shifting under my feet. About halfway down, my dog slipped. I heard him yelp and saw him sliding down the rocky slope. He managed to catch himself near the bottom, but I could tell he was hurt. I scrambled down the rest of the way and found him limping on one of his front legs. There was no time to check how badly he was hurt. I could hear them at the top of the ravine now. There was a small space under an overhanging rock. We crawled in and pressed ourselves as far back as we could go. I turned off the flashlight and held my dog close, covering his muzzle with my hand to try to keep him quiet. Shapes appeared at the top of the ravine. At least 2 of them, maybe 3, massive silhouettes against the slightly lighter sky. They stood there, looking down, and I was sure they could see us even in the darkness. One of them made a sound, a series of grunts and low calls. Another one responded. They were talking to each other. I watched them from our hiding spot, barely daring to breathe. The one on the left seemed bigger than the others, broader in the shoulders. It moved to the edge of the ravine and looked straight down at where we were hidden. I could see its head move, tracking from one side to the other, scanning the entire bottom of the ravine. Then it turned to the others and made a different sound, lower, more prolonged, almost like a question. One of the others responded, a series of short grunts. Then it pointed with one massive arm, gesturing toward our hiding spot. They knew we were here. They were discussing what to do about it. The big one made another sound, this one more decisive. Then it did something that made my blood run cold. It picked up a rock, a boulder easily the size of a basketball, and casually tossed it down into the ravine. The rock crashed against the slope, bouncing and breaking apart as it tumbled down, pieces of it shattering against the rocks near our hiding spot. It wasn't trying to hit us, it was showing us what it could do, demonstrating its strength. My dog whimpered softly, and I held him tighter, pressing my hand over his muzzle to keep him quiet. Another one of the creatures moved to the edge. This one was slightly smaller, but still massive by any standard. It made a chattering sound, almost like laughter, and picked up its own rock, threw it down into the ravine. The game seemed to amuse them. They stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 or 15 minutes, just standing at the top of the ravine, occasionally grunting to each other, sometimes throwing rocks down into the darkness. Every time a rock came crashing down, I tensed, wondering if they had finally decided to aim for us directly. But they never did. The rocks always landed at least 10 or 15 feet away from our hiding spot. Eventually, the big one made a sound that seemed final, decisive. The others responded with their own grunts, and then slowly, one by one, they turned away from the edge. They stood there for another moment, looking down at where we were hiding. Then, finally, they moved on. I watched their shapes disappear into the darkness, heard their footsteps fading away. But I didn't move, couldn't move. My whole body was frozen with fear, convinced that the moment we left this hiding spot, they'd come back. My dog eventually fell asleep, exhausted from running. I stayed awake, keeping watch, listening to every sound. The night dragged on forever. When I finally saw the first hints of dawn starting to lighten the sky, I felt a tiny bit of hope. We'd made it through the night. Whatever those things were, maybe they'd be less active during the day. We crawled out from under the rock. My dog was limping badly, and I could see his paw was swollen. I felt awful. I picked him up, all 90 pounds of him, and carried him while I tried to figure out which direction to go. We followed the ravine down, figuring it had to lead somewhere eventually. After maybe an hour, we emerged into a clearing, and my heart sank. The clearing was littered with stripped trees, massive claw marks gouged into the bark. There were structures made of branches, almost like crude shelters or nests, and bones, lots of bones. Deer, smaller animals, scattered everywhere. This was their territory. We'd stumbled right into the heart of it. The structures were the most unsettling part. They weren't random piles of branches. They were deliberate constructions, woven together in patterns that showed planning and thought. Some of them looked like sleeping platforms, raised off the ground and covered with what looked like moss and leaves for cushioning. Others were more like lean-tos, providing shelter from rain and wind. The trees that had been stripped of bark showed claw marks that went 10, 12 feet up the trunks. Whatever had done this was tall enough to reach that high without climbing. The gouges were deep, at least an inch into the wood, showing incredible strength. But it was the bones that really got to me. They weren't just scattered randomly, they were organized, piled in specific spots, sorted by size. The larger bones, femurs, and ribs from deer and elk were in one area. Smaller bones from rabbits and other small animals were in another. And in the center of the clearing, arranged in a rough circle, were skulls, at least a dozen of them, all from different animals positioned to face inward. It looked almost ritualistic, like they had some kind of purpose beyond just feeding. I noticed something else too. On some of the trees at the edge of the clearing, there were markings, not natural wear or damage from animals. Deliberate symbols, scratched or carved into the bark. Lines and circles, patterns that repeated. I didn't know what they meant, but they clearly meant something. This wasn't just where they lived. This was their territory, marked and claimed, and we were intruders. I backed away slowly, trying not to make any noise. My dog was heavy in my arms, but I didn't dare put him down. We had to get out of this clearing. That's when I heard a grunt from the tree line. One of them was there, standing in the shadows, watching us. I could see it more clearly now in the daylight than I had in any of the footage. It was covered in dark brown fur, matted and thick. The face was almost human but distorted, with a heavy brow and deep-set eyes. It was at least 8 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed impossibly wide. And it was looking right at us. In the daylight, I could see details I'd missed in the darkness. The fur wasn't uniform. It was lighter around the face and chest, darker on the arms and legs. There were scars visible on its arms, old wounds that had healed into raised lines cutting through the fur. Battle scars, maybe, or marks from pushing through thick brush. Its hands hung at its sides, and I could see how long the fingers were. How the thumbs were positioned more like a human's than an ape's. The hands looked capable of gripping, of manipulating objects. Tool-using hands. The face was the worst part, because it wasn't an animal face. The eyes were too intelligent, too aware. They tracked my movements with clear intent, watching me with what I can only describe as calculation. It was thinking, processing, making decisions. Its nose was broad and flat, almost like a gorilla's, but the mouth was more human-shaped. I couldn't see teeth, but I could see the lips moving slightly, like it was breathing through its mouth, or maybe tasting the air. The proportions were all wrong for a human. Arms too long, reaching down past where its knees would be. legs too thick and muscular, built for power rather than speed. But it stood upright with perfect posture, balanced and stable in a way that no bear or ape could manage. I didn't run. Some instinct told me that running would trigger the chase, and I was too tired, too hurt, carrying too much weight. We couldn't outrun it. Instead, I backed away slowly, never taking my eyes off it. My dog was rigid in my arms, growling low in his throat. The creature tilted its head slightly, like it was studying us. Then it took a step forward. I kept backing up, step by step, moving as smoothly as I could. The creature matched my pace, following but not charging. It seemed almost curious. We reached the edge of the clearing, and I stepped back into the trees. The creature stopped at the edge, like there was an invisible line it wouldn't cross. It stood there, watching us disappear into the forest, and made a sound, not aggressive, almost like a call or a warning. Then it turned and walked back into the clearing. We kept moving. My arms were screaming from carrying my dog, but I didn't stop until we'd put a good distance between us and that clearing. Finally, I had to set him down. He could barely walk, but he tried his best, limping along beside me. The forest started to look different, less dense, more open. Then I saw it through the trees. A road, an actual paved road with yellow lines down the middle. I almost cried with relief. We made it to the road and I collapsed onto the asphalt, my dog lying next to me. I pulled out my phone and finally had one bar of signal. I called for help, told them where we were as best I could describe it, and waited. We'd been walking down that road for maybe an hour when a pickup truck pulled up. A forest ranger, an older guy with a weathered face. He took one look at us, covered in scratches and dirt, my dog limping and bleeding, and his expression went serious. He drove us to a small ranger station a few miles away, got us water, looked at my dog's paw, called a vet. He asked what happened, and I tried to explain, but it all came out jumbled and confused. Camping trip went wrong, got lost, had to hike out in the dark. He seemed skeptical but didn't push it. He said he'd send a team back to get my stuff from the campsite. I told him where it was, or at least where I thought it was. I wasn't even sure anymore. The next day he came back, said they'd found my campsite, everything was destroyed, tent shredded, sleeping bag torn apart, food scattered everywhere. There were huge footprints in the mud around the camp. He showed me photos on his phone. The prints were at least 18 inches long, deep impressions in the soft ground near the stream. He said they were closing that section of the forest for maintenance, said there'd been some bear activity in the area and they want to make sure it was safe. He asked me for copies of any photos or video I might have from the trip. I gave him the camera footage. He watched it in silence, his expression unreadable. When it got to the part where you could see the creature standing in the trees, he paused the video and stared at the screen for a long time. He didn't say anything about what he saw, just copied the files onto his computer and handed the camera back to me. He told me it would probably be best if I didn't talk about this too much. Said people wouldn't understand, wouldn't believe me anyway. As I was leaving, I looked back at the forest one more time. At the tree line where the road met the trees, there were shapes in the shadows. Multiple shapes standing still, watching the ranger station, watching us leave. The ranger saw them too. I could tell by the way his jaw clenched and his hand moved to the gun on his hip. But he didn't say anything, just nodded at me and told me to drive safe. I haven't been camping since. Can't even think about it without feeling sick to my stomach. My dog recovered from his injured paw, but something changed in him. He won't go outside after dark anymore. During the day, he's fine, still playful and energetic. But the moment the sun starts to set, he wants to be inside, safe behind walls and locked doors. I still have the camera, still have the footage. Sometimes late at night when I can't sleep, I pull it up on my computer and watch those few seconds. That massive shape standing in the trees, watching us. I've paused it, zoomed in as far as the low resolution will allow, studied every pixel. I tried posting about it online once. Just a simple description of what happened, no video, no names. The responses were brutal. People called me a liar, said I was making it up for attention, accused me of trying to hoax people. One person even said I'd probably just seen a hunter in camouflage and my brain had filled in the rest out of fear. I deleted the post after a few hours. Some things people won't believe unless they see it themselves, and even then, their minds will find ways to rationalize it, explain it away, make it fit into what they think is possible. But I know what I saw. My dog knows what we ran from. Sometimes I wonder if they were really trying to kill us, or if they were just driving us out of their territory. The way that last one stood at the edge of the clearing, not crossing the invisible line. The way they let us go after we crossed the creek, almost like they'd made their point and were satisfied once we were gone. I think about all the missing persons cases in national forests, all the people who go into the woods and never come back, experienced hikers, seasoned campers, people who knew what they were doing. How many of them saw what I saw? How many of them ran like we did but didn't make it out? There are places in those forests where people aren't supposed to go, places that belong to something else. We crossed into one of those places and we were lucky to leave with our lives. I still have the camera, still have the footage. Sometimes I think about sharing it properly, putting it out there for people to see and judge for themselves. But then I remember the ranger's warning. Some things are better left in the forest. Some things aren't meant to be found, except we didn't find it. It found us. And every time my dog refuses to go near the back door after sunset, every time he stops and stares at the darkness outside with his ears back and his body rigid, I'm reminded that it's still out there, in those deep woods, far from the trails and the campgrounds, living in the places humans have forgotten about. My dog knew before I did. His instincts, millions of years of evolution, warned him that something was wrong long before my rational brain caught up. That whimper, that moment of pure fear, was him trying to tell me we needed to leave, that we were being watched by something that saw us as intruders in its territory. I should have listened sooner, should have left the moment he started acting strange, but I didn't, and we paid the price. We're lucky we paid it with nothing more than scratches and bruises and psychological scars that will probably never fully heal. The footage is still on the camera, still shows those few seconds of something massive standing in the trees, watching us with intelligence in its eyes. Still shows that moment when it took a step toward us, when it decided we were worth investigating further. I've thought about destroying the camera, erasing the footage, pretending none of it ever happened. But I can't, because it did happen. It was real. And as much as I wish I could forget it, as much as I wish I could go back to thinking of that forest as my safe place, my second home, I can't unknow what I know now. There are things in those woods, things that don't want to be seen, don't want to be known, things that have learned to avoid humans, to stay hidden, to only reveal themselves when someone stumbles too deep into their territory. And I stumbled into it. We both did. 3 weeks later, and I'm still sitting here in my living room with all the lights on, my dog on the couch next to me, both of us unable to shake the feeling that we're being watched. That somewhere out there in the darkness beyond my windows, something remembers us. Something knows where we live. My dog whimpers sometimes in his sleep now, a sound he never made before that trip. I wonder what he dreams about. Wonder if he sees those shapes in the darkness, those massive figures moving through the trees, those intelligent eyes watching from the shadows. I know I do. And every time I close my eyes, I'm back in that forest, running through the darkness with my dog beside me, hearing those heavy footsteps behind us, feeling the weight of being hunted by something that shouldn't exist. but it does exist. And now I have to live with that knowledge. For more interesting stories, check this out.